What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into the video, I want to give a shout out once again to the man, the myth, the legend, the brother Robert Mason coming through with 2 donations via the PayPal. Much respect to you for showing love to Too Raw for TV. All right, man. So look, I know the election is over. I know that the presidential election was now 3 weeks ago. But there are new things that are coming out that I think are extremely relevant to what we just witnessed during the 110 or so official days that Kamala Harris was the Democratic standard bearer. Now, throughout pretty much the entirety of the campaign, Kamala Harris versus Trump, most polling indicated Kamala Harris with a lead. And I think we all will agree to that. Now, there were a few outliers, for the most part, that had Trump maybe ahead of a point or statistically tied or whatever. But for the most part, you would agree, the majority of the polls had Kamala Harris ahead, maybe 50-48, 51-47, 52-47, right? All of the polling. The Harris campaign was able to raise over $1 billion on the perception that she was the candidate, at least the left-leaning media gave the perception that she was destined to beat the scandal-plagued, extremely flawed Donald Trump. But now it's been revealed that Harris's aides say that their own internal polling never had her ahead of Donald Trump. The leadership of outgoing Vice President Kamala Harris's 2024 presidential campaign said that internal polling never had her ahead of President-elect Donald Trump. After President Joe Biden began lagging heavily behind Trump in the polls in June and July, I guess those polls were actually accurate, the entrance of Harris appeared to solve Democrats' problems. From August until right before the election, a great many accredited public polls had Harris leading the former president. According to David Plouffe, I think it's Plouffe actually, David Plouffe, a senior advisor on the Harris campaign, this was never reflected in internal polling, which always had Harris behind or tied with Trump. He said in an appearance on the Pod Save America's podcast, "We didn't get the breaks we needed on election day. I think it surprised people because there were these public polls that came out in late September, early October, showing us with leads that we never saw." Plouffe added that internal polling didn't change much throughout the election, remaining mostly static since Harris joined the race in July. He appeared on the podcast with the other leaders of the Harris campaign, Jen O'Malley, Dillon, head of the campaign, Quentin Folks, deputy campaign manager, and Stephanie Cutter, who oversaw messaging and communications. All agreed with the assessment. The truth is that we really thought this was a very close race. We talked about the entire time we saw it as a margin of error race. They disclosed other premonitions of disaster, such as anticipating Florida going further for Republicans than before, which actually did occur. and Virginia going dangerously close to the Republicans. Overall, the Harris campaign leadership portrayed the race as doomed from the start, saying there wasn't much Harris could have done to change the outcome. Well, I can't agree with that. I think that if they had ran a capable politician, someone who wasn't a complete and total disaster like Kamala Harris, the Democrats could have won this race. They could have. Under usual circumstances, no. But because Donald Trump is such a, don't get me wrong, he has his core supporters, but there's a ceiling to that support. And if the Democrats were able to get a candidate that could actually give their base a reason to go out and vote, and you know what I'm saying, not just attack Trump. Yeah, you do that, but you're never giving people a reason to vote for you. You're giving the Trump haters, they're going to be motivated to go out there and vote. But believe it or not, there are some voters who are motivated by pocketbook issues. Okay? And the Democrats never really addressed that. And the biggest fail for her was when she was asked what would be different about her administration than Joe Biden, and she could not give an accurate answer for that. So, you know, when you look at the fact that she was just a disaster as far as interviews, a disaster as far as properly articulating what her vision for America would be, and just Trump all the time, got repetitive. And I think actually it began to turn off some voters. Whereas Trump, as flawed as he is, after that little fucked up spell they had in August going into September, and I talked about that, around the time of the J.D. Vance triumph at the VP debate, that's when the Trump campaign got back on message, got back on their footing, and the Harris campaign faltered. But the media, I've always talked about them, this left-leaning media, at this point in time, you have to be serious and start asking yourself, okay, why is it that all these polls had Harris with 3, 4, 5-point leads? It can't be just a coincidence. It can't just be a coincidence. You got to wonder at this point, you have to start questioning the authenticity of these supposed accredited and respected polls or polling groups. You have to wonder about this now, because what practices are they using? Because look, for a long time in this country, polling was pretty accurate. I mean, yeah, some polls are more accurate than others, but polling has been around since the 1930s, right? At least national polling. And I've never seen it this bad. I've never seen it this bad in the Trump era. And there's something going on here. There's something going on. Is it that people are lying? Well, that's the excuse that I've been given. I said, well, that's the only thing I could think of. People are lying. But if their internal polling is showing that they were never ahead, then that's telling me that these so-called accredited, trusted pollsters, they're cooking the polls. At least that's just my opinion. So this whole campaign was a total lie. It was a total lie. You know? So they was creating this false perception that she was winning, they and I want to bring up the money. I only bring up the money aspect only because the Harris campaign, her supporters, basically most of the networks, they created this perception that the Harris campaign was this force that was going to draw probably over 85 million votes. They were going to obliterate Trump in the polling. I mean, excuse me, in this election. To me, man, so this is crazy because you had Joe Biden come out now. What was it, about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that their internal polling had Biden losing an electoral landslide. Meanwhile, this guy was still running, talking about he was the best candidate for the job. And now her internal polling was showing that she was never ahead. And that this should have been a more, the way that the media portrayed it and the surrogates portrayed it, this should have been perceived as a much, much closer race than what they made it out to be. I mean, they were making it out to be like she was going to get 300 and something electoral votes. She was going to get 51% of the popular vote. So we were gaslighted the entire time by deceptive and manipulative media that for the most part she had this in the bag. They were creating this perception that her election was an inevitability to try to persuade voters, because they know a lot of voters want to be on the winning team, the winning side. What a scam. As of today, with very few exceptions, I'm no longer adhering to polling. I'm going with my gut. I'll look at some polling, but I'm going with my gut from now on. I've observed these elections closely now, or at least to a certain degree. I've observed these elections since 1992, technically 1988, but I was too young really to pay that much attention to that election. I was still trying to learn the electoral process at that time. So since I was 12 years old, so it's 32 years of observing these elections. I kind of know a little bit about this stuff, for certain patterns to look for, but I'm never again going to put as much stock in the polling as I had before. Because now the very measure, supposed scientific measure that we use to look at these things has now been compromised. It's been compromised. By the way, I hadn't said this yet, but my God, I was wrong about Florida and Texas. I was wrong about that. Well, I kind of felt after August that she was going to lose Texas, but I didn't know she was going to lose it by, 13 points. She lost Florida by 13, 14 points. I was stunned by that. Stunned. Remember, as popular as Barack Obama was back in 2008 and 2012, I don't think Florida was called for Barack Obama in 2008 until like maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning on election night. And I don't think Florida was called in 2012 for Barack Obama until like 4 days after election day. Something like that. But Florida is no longer a swing state. It has become firmly entrenched now as a GOP southern state. Florida used to be more of a swing state, except for in the 80s. But now, Democrats are in trouble. And they're right. Virginia went Democratic, but it was only a 4-point margin, whereas Biden won it by 10 points in 2020. And I suspect if Glenn Youngkin is on the ticket in 2028, they may lose that state. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it. Tell me what you guys think.